All right, guys. Hope everybody's doing okay today. We're going to go over chapter 7 for OTA 215 today. Again, be safe. Roads are terrible. Let us know if there's an issue with Wi Fi or power outages or anything like that. We'll help accommodate for it. But I'm going to go ahead and just do a recording for this today so you can watch it whenever today. Take notes. Make sure that you do. Um, your case studies. Remember, those are due tonight at midnight. Remember, in 215, whatever we do that day is due tonight at midnight. Okay? All right, so first we want to talk about some basic tenets of what cognitive aging is. A tenet is a basic principle of something. It just kind of helps guides it. The first tenet we want to talk about, it says cognitive aging is a lifelong developmental process and is best conceptualized as occurring from conception until death. Basically, what tenet one is, if you want to jot this down to remember it as, is aging is lifelong. Tenet number two says cognitive aging occurs within a framework of gains, declines, and stability, meaning that life has, or the aging process has ups, downs, and no change. There's periods where you're doing much better, there's periods where you're doing worse, and then there's periods where you're really not getting better or worse. You're pretty much just stable. Tenet number three, it says cognitive aging is best understood using a developmental lifespan approach that takes into consideration normative, age graded influences, and a normative socio historical influences and non normative life events. Basically, meaning that your aging process is affected by either normal or abnormal life experiences or life events. You know, if you have had a much harder life or gone through a lot more trauma in your life, your aging process is going to be different than somebody that did not have those kind of things. Um, Tenet number four is this cognitive aging is impacted by and incorporates a wide range of inter and intra individual differences, including but not limited to lifestyle factors such as diet, exercise, healthy habits, and education. Meaning that the aging process is affected by your lifestyle. If you lived a sedentary lifestyle where you didn't get a lot of exercise, you ate junk food all the time, your aging process is going to be a lot different than somebody who, exercised 2 times a day, followed the regimens and ate a standard healthy diet. So, why do we care about these? What are some of the issues that we're studying? Selection of appropriate design to avoid misunderstanding and misinterpretation of findings. You have to decide what this goes back to those theories that we were talking about in earlier chapters. How you feel about aging, what is guiding your principles about aging when you look at someone who's going through that process, even yourself or family members, clients, what is gauging your mindset? For example, a cross-sectional design can exaggerate group differences by measuring only a single point in time. You could say, okay, this person lived in a sedentary lifestyle, this person lived in a very exercise-based, healthy regimen lifestyle. Look at both of them at their 40s. See who is doing better in this, who's doing better in this, blah, 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 and go from there. I mean, and there might be advantages to both sides. Someone who lives a sedentary lifestyle might be more gauged to learn in technology or is better with technology overall, while somebody who's not focused so much on the tech side but more on their health and well-being side is going to have an overall maybe lower blood pressure, things like that. Just some references that you can make. You're literally looking at one point in time. Remember, this goes back to those researches that we talked about last time, that cross-sectional research. So you're literally looking at one difference, but it shows greater differences in between groups because you're looking at one point. You're not looking every time. You're looking at one designated time, and it tends to show much greater differences in between groups. So keep that in mind when we're talking about this kind of stuff. All right. So the basic cognitive process. This is to serve as the foundation or building blocks or for higher ordered cognitive processes, include sensory, perceptual, attention, excuse me, short-term memory, working memory, and long-term memory symptoms. There's all kinds of different things that go into this, right? We're going to break down each one of those a little bit more. The first one we're going to talk about is sensory processes. This is responsible for transmitting stimuli. We all know that that's what our senses do. Hearing, taste, sight, all of that. It's giving us feedback so we can either paint a mental image or an idea, understand our surroundings. We're constantly getting this feedback. Increased age is associated with decreased auditory and visual-based processing. There is a reason that is highlighted, so I would definitely keep that in mind, okay? The second is perception. This is assigning meaning to something. This is taking in those sensory stimuli and saying, okay, this is what I'm seeing right now. I see a laptop in front of me with notes and my coffee cup. That being able to get that perception. If you have a decreased auditory or visual processing as you age, that's going to help throw off your perception because you're not able to see or hear as well. There's not as big of a decline in the perception part of things because they may use other, touch, taste, all these smells, all your other different senses. They may use these things to help compensate. So there's not as big of a decline in perception as there is in sensory processes unless there's some kind of a disease or condition present. So we're talking about normal aging processes here too. All right, so attention. You have different types of attention. You have sustained attention. We have talked about these several times. That is more focused. You're directly focused on something. You've got this. There's not a big difference in sustained attention between younger adults and older adults unless there's a disease present. And then you have selective attention. This is directing your attention in between things or being able to pick out, okay, I'm paying attention to this. And, I can block out the, okay, now I'm going to select to pay attention to this. There's not really a big age-related difference there between young and old. So, keep that in mind. Next is alternating attention. This is where you can switch back and forth between two or more tasks or activities. And this is going, okay, I'm going to type, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, I'm going to do this. This might even be alternating. I like to kind of think of it as like if you're studying and watching a movie, you're kind of like looking down, looking up, looking down, looking up the whole time. That's alternating. There are significant age-related differences between older adults and younger adults in doing this. Older adults do much better when they're focusing on one task for a more extended period of time, not bouncing back and forth. I think it'd be interesting to see some studies on how younger people are able to multitask like that and alternate their attention, especially with like social media and cell phones, how we're able to jump back and forth in between apps pretty quickly and, it's seamless. Now you try to teach an older adult how to bounce back and forth. They don't like that. They want to stay absolutely dedicated to whatever they're doing until it is done. And then you have divided attention. This one is really hard. This is paying attention to two things at the same time. It declines with age. I think it's hard anyway, all the time, but this is literally keeping your attention on two things at the same time. Okay. Now we're going to talk about memory. So memory is exactly what we think it is. We're going to break it down a little bit into some different types of memory, and we did this a little bit last semester as well. But most form of memory declines with age. So when we go through these, most of them are declining. Okay. First is sensory memory. This stores sensory information for a very short duration. Okay. So this is taking it in, seeing something or hearing something and only needing to remember it for a short amount of time. For example, me saying, in one of the cognitive tests they do, speech therapists do it all the time, and we do it some, where they'll look at you and say, okay, remember the words car, red, pencil, and then they'll come back and try to do it again. And after they've worked through it and say, okay, now tell it to me. This is you just remembering some kind of sensory information for a very short amount of time. That's the hearing part of it. You could do a visual test, put things in order and say, okay, remember this, come back. All right, now put them back in that same order. And then you got short-term memory. This is stored for approximately 15 to 20 seconds without rehearsal. This is, again, something that you might not need very long. Sensory information and short-term memory kind of go hand in hand. They're extremely close to each other because sensory is kind of a form of short-term. But it's exactly the same thing. You're, saying, okay, memorize this. Okay, I need to memorize this. But it's a very short amount of time. Maybe a phone number. Someone calls, say, hey, here's the phone number for so-and-so. You don't write down, you just keep trying to remember it for those 15, 20 seconds till you type it in. Then you got working memory. This stores, maintains, and actively manipulates information. A good example of this would be like adding up the total cost of your groceries and doing this all like simultaneously. So saying, okay, I grabbed this cheese for $3.99, grab this milk for $2.99, and just keep going down, and you're able to calculate in your head, okay, this is how much it's going to cost me when I get to the register because they're on a budget. That's a super common thing. I think a lot of people do that in their head without even thinking about it. Like, okay, I'll probably have 50, 60 bucks in my buggy now. All right, so you have long-term memory. We're going to break that down into a couple here. You have declarative memory and semantic memory. Declarative is a verbal-based memory system and is further divided into semantic and episodic long-term memory systems. This is just pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a verbal-based memory system. Like you're remembering it through, verbiage. The second one is semantic memory. This stores general world knowledge that is not linked to a specific learning episode. This might be something like factual information. Who was the first president? That might be it's not linked to a learning episode. Like, oh, in the first grade, I learned George Washington was first, but you just know it. It's just general, speaking knowledge. We know it. It's world knowledge. We know that, what the flag looks like for the United States. You can't remember like, oh, this is when I learned that. It's just generalized knowledge that you know. So yeah, then you have procedural non-declarative. This stores information for motor-based skills, behaviors, and this is well preserved later in life. This is your like absolute deepest type of memory. Like one example would be like putting on your shoes. Once you've done that, it's really hard to forget that. Now, unless there's a disease or something present. The other one would be like riding a bike. You always hear once you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget. Well, this is where that is done. It's procedural. And then you have prospective memory. This is where you remember future-oriented or scheduled tasks without the use of external memory aids. This is like saying, okay, I remember next Thursday I have a doctor's appointment, but you didn't have to look at the calendar. You didn't have to look at your phone. You didn't need a reminder. You just remembered it. You remember things that are scheduled in the future. Okay? All right. All right. The next part here, and if you guys have questions on this chapter, just definitely feel free to email me. Read this chapter for sure. It's important to, when you are working with a client and they have any kind of cognitive issue, decline, it's important to figure out where that decline is so you can, work through it and find interventions that's going to help them. For example, if you have a patient who has a problem with, long-term memory versus short-term memory, any of them, you need to understand where that difference is. Where's that lying? Is it something that you can help provide an aid to help them remember things? Do they need a memory book? Do they need a scheduling book? Do they need alarm set in order to take their medications? Things like that. It's very important for you guys to understand these different cognitive processes and ways of thinking, because if you can't tell what the problem is, there's no way to choose the correct intervention. With that being said, we're going to keep going here. The next cognitive process, these higher ordered processes, is executive functioning. This is like your reasoning skills, your decision-making skills, your problem-solving, judgment, abstract thought, logic, your higher order level of thinking. This is, it can be a wide range between younger and older. There could be very significant differences or none. It really just depends on the person, and I would say that's true across my practice as well. It really just depends on what the task is. And I tend to go back and forth a lot on this statement of there being wide variety in this. I think that they just use executive functioning different than what we do. For example, they may love to pay their bills, writing checks and mailing them. My mother will always do that no matter what. I'm like, but executive functioning tells me and my decision making that you can sit down and do this all with a couple clicks on, the website with bill pay. It's super easy. I'll show you how to do it. No, I want to write it out. The task is still being done, but it's done differently. And I think that makes things harder when you throw in technology and those kind of different reasoning and decision-making skills, problem solving. They're not bad at it, even across younger or older ages. It's just they problem solve at a different rate and they problem solve with different methods. Now, for test purposes, when it comes up, yes, there are significant differences in executive functioning between younger and older adults. And I think you guys will agree when you get out into your practice that it's not, I don't necessarily see that big of a disparity unless there's a disease present. I see a difference in how they use their executive functioning. Differences seem much greater as the task gets more complex. Again, you add in more things like a computer and needing to remember this website and stuff. Those kind of things might make the task a little bit more complex for people that aren't used to it. But again, I err on the side of it's not that big of a disparity. They just do it a little differently. Let's talk about some problem-solving skills. Older adults tend to use less efficient strategies. Again, like I said, with the whole idea of shying away from computers. Let me just do this my way. The thing that I've done it for 20 years. Let me do it this way. Okay, and then these results are very lab-based and may be different in the real world. Again, I'm on that side. They are different in the real world. I added that in the slide just to show you guys. Their problem-solving skills I don't feel like they are diminished unless there is a disease present. They just do things different. They think of the world differently. I think that gap is going to become way more condensed as we age and the newer generation comes up because we are so tech-based. I don't feel like there's going to be that big of a gap, but that's just me talking. And then you have everyday cognition. This is utilized cognitive processes in real-world context. There are fewer age-related decrements. This is something that you're going to do every day. With your memory, like how to swipe a credit card or how to, anything like pay at the store, those kind of things. This is just everyday stuff that you do. There's very few age-related decrements in that. We all kind of can swipe a credit card or use a card. Now, you might see them take a second to find out if they need to swipe, chip, tap their card, whatever. But there's very few age-related decrements there. All right, so some other one is language production and speech comprehension. This is production and comprehension processes. This is being able to say a thought and comprehend what someone else is saying back to you. Older adults outperform younger adults in message production, such as storytelling, while they perform less in, just basic back and forth kind of conversation. I think this is because as people get older, it's harder for, I'm going to put this, it's kind of this idea of this wisdom and expertise getting in the way. I'm going to cover those, then we'll come back to it. Wisdom is mixed findings with views ranging from wisdom decreasing with age to increasing with age to remain stable. What is wisdom itself? It's exactly what you think about. It's knowledge gained by life experiences. Now, we may see differences in opinion here, where people are going to say, wisdom decreases with age, or wisdom increases with age. I'm on the side of it increases with age to a certain point until there is a decrease in cognitive ability or a disease becomes present, anything like that. I see older people as wise. And then you have expertise. This is a high level skill or knowledge in a particular area. This is maintained later in life, and this can help compensate for other things that have decreased. This is just a specialized skill that they knew. If someone was a master woodworker, they're not going to forget that. That's going to be one of the later things if they do forget from a disease, but in the normal aging process, that's something that's going to stay with them. That's who they are as a person. So taking these ideas back of wisdom and expertise back to the whole storytelling and tangible concept, your back and forth kind of conversation. I think wisdom and expertise might get in the way of this back and forth kind of conversation. Like, say you're talking politics or religion, some of the do not talk about kind of topics. It's really hard to, if they have this wisdom, expertise, life experiences behind them, to listen to a younger person that's trying to come up with this new idea and new, reform. It's definitely makes people butt heads. So I kind of think that's more of the reason why that back and forth conversation is harder. But that's just my personal opinion. Some implicit processing and explicit processing. Implicit is an unintentional, it occurs without awareness, and it's effortless. There's nothing really to it. I kind of see this as driving a familiar route to work. You don't have to think about it when you get in your car or when you're coming to school. You know the route you're going to take. You just get in and go. And I know we've all kind of had that thought where you turn on the radio or turn on an audio book or podcast, whatever, you listen to it driving down the road, and you're like, how did I even get here? Like, what? I feel like there was a gap in time that I wasn't even paying attention. You didn't wreck, and you were kind of aware of everything going around you, but you really can't remember that time. There was no real awareness and memory going on there or processing. Then you have explicit processing. This is intentional. It's exactly the opposite. There is some age-related decrement to that, and I kind of use the example here of driving an unfamiliar route to work. This is being able to say, oh, if I turn down McCorkle Avenue, okay, this road is closed. I'm going to go down the street, take this right, and then I'll be able to circle back around to my normal route. This is explicit processing. Kind of sounds a lot like, in my mind, it helps me remember it as problem-solving skills. All right, so some intellectual abilities. Excuse me. You have fluid intelligence. This is the ability to use abstract reasoning. This begins to decline around age 70, and the ability to use abstract reasoning is looking at everyone's point of view and thinking outside the box. Then you have crystallized intelligence. Crystallized is an accumulation of knowledge, and this is pretty much, set in stone. This is very, very, very highly representative of individual experiences. Whatever the person has experienced throughout their life is how they're going to think about a subject. If they had a bad run-in with, a certain group of people or in a city or whatever, oh, that's a bad city, I'm not going back there anymore, blah, blah, blah. That person is bad, I'm not doing that anymore. Because they've had a life experience that taught them that. It's really, really hard to get that to change. Now, this is something we do now. Our crystallized intelligence is what, this is not something later or needs years and years and years of life experience. This can be changed by you gaining knowledge from an experience. This increases throughout the life and is well maintained in older age. These, I feel like, crystallized intelligence forms or core beliefs. The next thing is terminal decline, which is a significant decline in cognitive functioning that occurs several years prior to death. This is something that you can see In a patient, this is not necessarily, you can see terminal decline in patients that have dementia, Alzheimer's, but it is not dementia and Alzheimer's or any, cognitive related disease. This is just the wearing down of the body, more or less. Your cognitive functioning has a significant decline several years prior to the patient or whoever dying. All right, so I know we got to talk about some theories here. I'm going to add on a few more. These are, again, very important. I highlighted some of the important parts to help you guys remember them, okay? Yeah, speed of processing theory. This is from Salthouse. This is the slowing or decreased speed by which individuals are able to process information. This is the difference between younger and older adults, okay? The next is working memory by Craik and Jennings. This is saying that your working memory declines and are in part responsible for explaining age-related changes in cognitive processing between older and younger adults. So what we're trying to explain here anyway is the difference between younger and older adults. As you age, how does your cognitive processing skills work? Next is inhibition by Hasher and Zaks. This is where they say the client has difficulty filtering or actively ignoring irrelevant information, being able to switch back and forth between what is important or filter out what is important and what is not. They're saying this is the issue. This is what causes a cognitive decline. Then you have one of the last ones here is the common cause. This is declines in sensory functioning, resulting in you getting poor quality information. And it's saying that this is why that older adults are not able to perform cognitive tasks as well as younger people, saying that all of your senses decline as you get older, saying that you're getting crappy, poor information. So you're not able to perform tasks as well. That's their theory. Not one theory here works alone. Okay, so you may say, it might be a little bit of common cause, but it also could definitely be some inhibition going on. You need to be able to, when you see a scenario, either in real life or you see it on an exam or whichever, you need to be able to say, okay, I think there might be a huge decline in sensory functioning here. That might be what the issue is. There might be a decline in some executive functioning skills. Let me see which part. There might be some long-term memory issues. Let me see which one it is, and break it down. And there's different assessments, things that you guys can do. Find them with a quick Google search. There's tons of them out there for different cognitive assessments. One person I always like to look to for some different cognitive assessments were speech therapists that I work with. They have so many just at their disposal that they can name them off. That's one of their big areas of specialty. But they're complementary of each other, and no one theory here is going to work alone. So next, optimizing the cognition later in life. There's three main strategies that have research-driven support. Okay, how do we keep these cognitive skills going for these elderly people later in life? The first one is physical activity, whether it be aerobics, strengthening, balance, flexibility activity, any kind of physical activity and movement. What that does is it increases blood flow of oxygen and nutrients to the brain tissue. It's going to help increase brain volume. There's lots of different physical, metabolic responses to, having just basic activity. I would warm up if I had a patient who had a cognitive decline and I needed them to perform a, semi-difficult task for what their range was. I would say I would have them do a light form of exercise, nothing big. We might just toss a ball back and forth, smack a balloon back and forth, something like that, just to get a little bit of blood flowing going up, and they will perform significantly better on the assessment because they're more awake. They're getting more blood flow to their brain. They're able to perform these activities at a higher level, and I'll recommend that to patients who have or to patients' caregivers who are taking care of someone who has Alzheimer's or dementia, even later in stages. Any kind of physical activity is very, very important in order to get these people up and running in order to have better cognitive, responses to whatever you want them to do. So it's a good strategy to keep in mind. Second is get something that's mentally stimulating. If it's something that's boring to the patient and it's not stimulating at all to them, while they're not going to respond near as well. You need to give them something that will promote some kind of growth or development, something that will be challenging yet, appropriate for the patient. It needs to have all kinds of different stimulating areas, and it needs to be, patient needs to be interested in it. Don't pick something that they're going to hate, which you think, oh, I will never do that. It's easy to do that. Our former director, Kay Loesch, used to say all the time that if one of her students ever gave her a pegboard or cones, if she ever had them in therapy, that she would throw them back at them. So picking something that is mentally stimulating to them, very personable. And the last thing is social engagement. I always loved, and I hate that COVID has taken this away from a lot of skilled nursing facilities. I loved getting patients, multiple patients from different, that might be working with different disciplines, or maybe another COTA or OT there, having them all sit around the table and working on tasks and talking back and forth. Because there's this element of social need for everybody. They might absolutely hate it, say, oh, I don't, but they tend to do much better when they're in a social environment. That could be for a few different reasons. It could very well be for, oh, they're watching me, I want to do good. It could be that they're just not really paying attention as much as they are talking and they're performing the task. And it might be something simple. You may have a patient whose goal is for them to get out of bed 3 days a week for a couple hours because they haven't been out of bed for 3 months. And you might bring them down, have them sit at a table with you in their wheelchair or whichever. Have them color a sheet, working on some fine motor skills. Have them sit around talking to people. That's out of bed, social engagement, activity tolerance. All these different areas you're hitting by just simply having them at a table coloring a page. There's so many things you're working on. So there's such a massive factor of social engagement with cognition. And I think you'll understand this a lot better. Hopefully, when you guys get into your field works, if you go to a nursing facility or a facility with multiple patients, you can see them working together and they're not completely social distance from each other. They can talk, and look at each other, and have a good time. And I hope that is what world we're living in by the time we get to field works. All right, and the last thing here is what is our role in supporting cognition? What do we do? One thing is we support engagement in social activities. That's absolutely massive. Home exercise programs is another huge one. Now, when you guys think of home exercise programs, I know you're thinking, okay, I'm going to have them lift this dumbbell or pull on this TheraBand 3 times a day, blah, blah, blah. This does not always have to be the case. It may be appropriate, but it doesn't always have to be it. You may have them do an activity several times a week. That can be part of the home exercise program. You might have them work on a crossword puzzle or a word search, something they may like, jigsaw puzzles, tabletop tasks, knitting. I don't care what it is, as long as it's safe. That could very well be part of their home exercise program. So when you guys start coming up with more of your home exercise programs throughout the semester as assignments, you guys need to be aware it's not just exercise based, it's activity based. You can do any of these things that we talked about that help support cognition on top of doing light exercise every day. You kind of get, that's the cool thing is, and one of my favorite things about OT is treatment is so individualized. You really do get to choose whatever you want to work on with the patient. As long as you're addressing the goals, you get to choose the interventions. And then again, is community engagement programs. It might be very simple enough as having somebody get out of their house finally after several days, or several weeks or months or years. It really just depends. One of my favorite programs for this is at the VA. They have a van daycare program that will come and pick up the elderly veterans, and they'll go to an adult daycare center at the VA in Beckley and they have pool tables, they have church groups that come in and sing, they have game tables, they have little exercise groups, they have all kinds of stuff. And it's super beneficial for the patients. They get so much out of it because they're just getting out of their house. So that is it for today, guys. Make sure that you are doing the case study that's at the end of chapter 7 today. It is due by midnight tonight. I'm not exactly sure how many questions that it has. I don't have my book with me here today. If you guys have any questions, definitely feel free to email me and ask, and I will see you guys hopefully tomorrow.